Hello and welcome to Just Films and That. This is the podcast that celebrates films we reckon might be underrated or underseen. I'm Alice Oliver, and this week it was Josh's turn to pick the film, and he went with Vacation from 2015. So let's see what we reckon. So Josh, Vacation from 2015.
Yes,
so,
indeed.
Spoiler warning, listeners, if you haven't seen it yet. So Josh, tell us, what is the film about? And why did you pick it?
So what's the film about? Well, it is a continuation / sequel, not really too sure what it is, but it's in the world of the National Lampoon vacation films that are primarily from the 80s and 90s, which are Christmas Vacation, European Vacation, with the Griswold family. Most famously had obviously Chevy Chase in it as Clark Griswold, and then his wife played by Beverly D'Angelo. In this version, their son, Rusty, who has grown up, played by Ed Helms, is going on a similar vacation with his family. So it's him and his two sons and his wife, played by Christina Applegate, and they're going to Wally World, and disaster ensues, essentially. That is what it's about. Why did I pick it? Well, so I picked this one for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we hadn't done an out-and-out comedy for a while. And okay. I thought, well, I'll just pick an out-and-out comedy. I can't really remember the last time we did an out-and-out comedy that wasn't even like a little bit of a rom-com or a little bit of something else. So that's one of the reasons. Mm-hmm. And this one's been on my list for a little while because it was really poorly received when it came out, right? And, it's not perfect, as I've said before, when I've picked this sort of thing before. But I think there's things to like in there, and I think it's actually okay. As I say, it's not perfect. It probably wouldn't be in there in the greatest comedies ever made. But I think there's enough to like in there to say that it's underseen. Sorry, underrated. Underrated.
The other one. The
other whole 50% of the point of the podcast. That's it. Only two to remember. Only two. And I forgot one of them. Anyway, so had you seen this before?
I hadn't seen it, hadn't heard of it, had no idea about this extended universe.
So you're not familiar with the National Lampoon films like Christmas?
Not at all.
So you've never watched like Christmas Vacation or anything like that?
Nope.
Really?
No, I don't know. One? I don't know a darn thing. Like I recognize the title when you just said it, but no, I have no idea what that means, what that's in reference to.
It's just a series of comedy films from the 80s and 90s that are essentially about one family called the Griswolds, and it's just all.
Should I go back and watch them?
I've not seen all of them. I've seen, I think, two of them. The Christmas one's good, and the one where they go to Europe's quite funny. Yeah, I mean they're okay. They're like they're very of their time, but they are. It follows the same formula as this, which is man tries to get family to bond, everything goes wrong. Man tries to keep it together. Wife is voice of reason.
Yeah, and classic formula,
farcical things, and it's very formulaic. It's very predictable. But I think, as I say, I think there's enough in it. So you've not seen it before. So did you have any expectations going into it then?
No, not really at all. Obviously, you see the thumbnail and you kind of get a bit of a vague idea of who might be in it.
When Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo turn up in this, did that just mean nothing to you?
I was like, there's Piers from Community. That's what that meant to me. That was that.
Yeah, well, that's funny, isn't it? I don't think I've ever met anyone who's not like even heard of those films before.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's maybe they're more underseen than I thought. I thought they were pretty well. Pretty well known.
I definitely think I'm the issue here. I think it's like
I'm the problem. You're the problem.
I do think I'm the problem. And I will admit
it's not
that.
me. It's you. Is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's definitely me.
It's always me. Don't worry. So, well, let's get stuck into it then. So, I'm nervous here. What did you think?
All right. So for me, it was a somewhat unoriginal, uninspiring family caper comedy, knocked up several notches by a brilliant cast, right? So Ed Helms, Christina Applegate, Chris Hemsworth, and Keegan-Michael Key are all people that make me smile just by being there. Ed Helms and Christina Applegate I thought were brilliant together. And seeing a young Chris Hemsworth is just really entertaining for me now. He is one of those that I could probably watch anything that he's in. And I actually did the other day as well. He's in a film on Netflix that turned out to be really mediocre. But just him being there just like made it better.
It was enough to make it. Yeah, I can't tell you how many like Tom Hardy or Benedict Cumberbatch films I've watched and been like, why am I watching this? It's because they're in it. Like, couldn't give a shit about the film. If you replace them with someone else, I wouldn't watch it.
Yeah, and that is how I feel about him. So when he turned up, I was like, okay, yeah, this is fun. So yeah, I thought, but you know, bit meh, but the cast, the cast I thought were brilliant.
And you got Charlie Day in there as well.
And
Caitlin Olsen,
what's her
D from
name?
Sweet D.
D,
yeah. So
it was Caitlin Olsen.
Nick Kroll, Michael Pena.
Yes, a lot of Leslie Mann,
playing a sister.
Massive cast in there.
So did it make you laugh even like a little bit?
Yeah, some of it did. Yeah. Some of it did. So some of the best humor in it was around kind of misunderstanding and such. So obviously there's one moment where the son, so Ed Helms' kid, Rusty, so Rusty's son doesn't know what a rim job is. So he asks Rusty, what's a rim job? He doesn't know either. Rim job, Alice? It's when you kiss someone with your lips, because your lips are like the rim, right?
Yes,
so they're outside. They're outside this motel in public. There's a girl that he fancies, and I think another adult or something. And he goes, "Oh, you're not too old to give your dad a good night rim job, are you?" Because he thinks it's just a kiss. And so that sort of thing I do find funny. So for you, was this like a first time watch in a while?
Yeah, probably a couple of years. I think I saw it around the time it was probably released on streaming or whatever, and it was just one of those films I put on. You know, you might see it on the banner on one of the streaming services. You just want something that's just disposable, light, easy watch.
Watching.
And I knew the other films as well. And I had heard as well. I remember it coming out and it being poorly received by critics and stuff. So I think I probably put it on out of curiosity in that sense as well.
Yeah, want to assess this. Like, was it as bad as they think?
Exactly.
So what were your thoughts? Were you sort of delighted? Did it still have the same magic for you?
So yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it this time round more or less the same amount as I enjoyed it when I watched it. I still think it's pretty funny. I laughed a good few times. I laughed in this film more than I've laughed at other films that are comedies and stuff like that. So I think it's quite relatable. Like if you ever spent a long time in with your family in a car, I think all the family, like you say, they're all really quite likable. You know, you got Ed Helms, who gives a really good central performance as Rusty. As the sort
good.
of
He's funny.
Yeah, he's like the middle class waspy dad type of thing, trying to keep it together. Just all and you know, that's what makes the old films good as well. Now, I won't keep harping on about the good films, but it's all about how the dad or the parents have always got the best of intentions. Like there's no malice. All they want to do is bond as a family, have some good quality family time, and all that sort of stuff. And I quite like that. I think there's an innocence to it, and I don't think. And I'll come on to this in a bit. There are parts where it perhaps falls a little bit into the lowest common denominator humour, but I think there's enough things in there that make me laugh that aren't like knob jokes or poo jokes or fart jokes. Like the bit
of that.
There's definitely a bit of that, and we'll come on to that. But the fact that the car is so shit. It's just a really it's a really simple joke that there was no rental cars, so we had to rent a really shit make, and they don't know what the buttons do, so stuff keeps going wrong with it. And I find that really funny. There's the bit where the 5 different cops are in the 5 different states, and they're all trying to arrest each other.
This is my jurisdiction.
So I suppose the humour is quite juvenile, is quite daft, but it's more silly than rude. And I quite like that. I think there's an innocence to it. It definitely does feel like, I say, like the Griswold films of old. That whole idea of the dad is perpetually optimistic. Like things are just going wrong for him. He's getting hurt. He's getting covered in crap. And he's just like, well, kids, you know, pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off. That whole idea, that sort of stick up the arse, like, what's the word? What's the word? Not repentive.
Uptight?
Yeah, like uptight, like, you know, like definitely hasn't had sex for years, sort of.
Right, okay, sort of a bit oppressed.
Oppressed, that's the word. Like repressed, oppressed, whatever the word is. Yeah, I think the two teenage sons are good in this as well. Like, I quite enjoy that. Good. Christina Applegate is brilliant, so she plays the sort of unfulfilled, bored moral compass of the family. Like you say, good little performances from the supporting cast as well. Chris Hemsworth, Leslie Mann, Charlie Day, you know, like you say, Keegan-Michael Key, people like that. So Leslie Mann's in this as well. So she plays the sister, who is also a character in the old in the old films from the 80s, and she's grown up and married to a really right-wing conservative weatherman played by Chris Hemsworth. That's quite funny. I really like Leslie Mann. I think she's one of the most underrated actors. I've actually got a film of hers that I want to pick, which I'm saving for a few films time. But I will probably pick that in the next, I don't know, couple of months or whatever. So
very exciting.
Overall, that was my main point, was the cast are likeable, they all give good performances, the supporting cast are great, and the story is really quite simple, and I think it's done quite well. It's not perfect, there are flaws with it, which we'll get onto, but I think it's just pretty funny.
Yeah, so some of the moments of comedy for me were, so kind of a running theme throughout is like overdoing the joke. So usually past to the point of it being funny until it becomes funny again, if you get what I mean. So Rusty's co-pilot is an older gentleman, and he says to Rusty, like, "Oh, thank you for going to bat for me last week," in reference to like a disciplinary or something that he got at work, or them wanting him to leave because he's too old or something. And then he repeats this to Rusty like 3 or 4 times, obviously indicating that he has poor memory. And it's funny because like the second time it's like, "Oh yeah, you've done it again, haha." But then the third or fourth time it becomes funny again. And this happens again when they're on the plane and there's some turbulence, and Rusty gropes a female passenger sort of accidentally because the turbulence has knocked him into her. And it doesn't happen once, it doesn't happen twice, it happens 3 or 4 times. And it's funny that it can go from being maybe a little bit funny to not being funny to then being even funnier.
It's a bit like
I don't know how that happens.
Well, you see it a lot in Family Guy, don't you? So they'll do jokes where it's like and it can go for like, there are some episodes of Family Guy where there's a joke in it where I will like skip. I'll skip
it lasts about 8 minutes.
And I think the whole idea
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cowboy.
Or there's ones where it's like, Peter's bought Chris a frog and he's trying to get rid of it, and he throws it against the wheel.
Oh, he keeps throwing it,
and she's trying to get it, and it just keeps flopping down. And I think if you plot a trajectory of the joke, you're like, there's the initial funniness, and then there's like a pause, and then as it goes up, then you start thinking about what's going on, like why is it, and then you laugh because of the awkwardness of the length of time, and then you start laughing because you're laughing. And then you start laughing at because it gets ridiculous, doesn't it? So it sort of goes up and down a little bit like a roller coaster, which is a bit of a plot of the film.
Indeed,
so analysis,
definitely a little bit like that. There we are. The other one as well that I just have to mention is, so Chris Hemsworth, so Stone. One of his things is that he compares everything to a faucet. Yeah, like his like analogies or like his metaphors or whatever are always connected to a faucet. And again, this happens like 4 or 5 times that he does it. Oh, it's just so funny, and his delivery as well. Chris Hemsworth is just he's so funny. He was a real highlight for me. Like when he came on the screen, I was like, oh, awesome. He was just so funny.
And they do a really good job of just making a joke out of the fact that it's Chris Hemsworth. Like he's just like tall, handsome, muscly.
Yeah, and just perfect in every way, except for being incredibly right wing and having some really weird views on things. But again, that's weird as well. And it just it was just a really entertaining character to have. I really like some of the family dynamic. And even beyond the immediate family, some of the relationships between the other characters. So within the family, you've got the younger brother who bullies his older, more sensitive brother. You've got Rusty, who isn't a bad husband, but just doesn't seem to understand his wife's needs at all. Like she talks about the fact that she'd love to go to Paris, or at least just go on a different vacation this year instead of the same cabin that they go to every year. So what does he do? He plans to go to a theme park that was meaningful to him as a child and means absolutely nothing to her, and somehow comes to the conclusion that that will make her happy. So he's not bad and he's not a prick, but they just feel like they aren't on the same page a lot of the time. And then there's obviously comedy in there. And then beyond that, pretty much everyone's relationship with Stone is amusing. So if I'd have watched this when it came out, I think before Hemsworth, cementing himself as Thor and all that, I don't think it would have been as funny for me. And I reckon I would have been totally unamused by that character. But it's almost like retroactively funny, if you get me. A bit like how I feel about Bill and Ted. Like it's just funnier because Keanu Reeves is in it.
Yeah, it's like a bit like the way Tom Cruise is in Tropic Thunder. Like if that's not like the way you watch Tropic Thunder, if that was like another comedy actor, if that was, I know he's already in it, but if that was Jack Black, or someone like that,
you just
be like,
it's
Jack Black in it. Because it's Tom Cruise, you're laughing because what he's saying is funny, and then you go, it's Tom Cruise.
It's Tom Cruise. It's Tom Cruise. Yeah.
I can't believe it's Tom Cruise. And that self-referential humour by casting someone like Tom Cruise. And like you say, at this point in his career, Chris Hemsworth wasn't as big as Tom Cruise. He wasn't even as big as Chris Hemsworth is now. Probably wasn't quite a household name. Like, he'd done the first 2 Thors, but he wasn't, he wasn't the biggest movie star or one of the biggest movie stars in the world at that time. Whereas if you did it now, he would be. So that little nod and wink at the audience, I think, makes that joke work.
Yeah, it's funny. And I also feel like actually some thought has gone towards the character depth. Like, everyone has their own personality, their own quirks and their own interests. And there's just a few little details and off-the-cuff remarks throughout that help you believe that these characters existed like before the film started.
Yes,
and that they've had a life. So you do believe them a bit more. And I think you actually get a bit more depth to them than you would perhaps other comedies. But I suppose that's maybe to do with what you said, that there is this extended universe and that, these characters in sort of some form or another did exist before this film.
Did it work for you as if this was, obviously you didn't know that, so did it work for you in a film on its own? Do you think you...
Oh, totally.
That's what I mean. So it works well, doesn't it?
It does. Like, you don't feel lost and you don't feel like you're missing anything.
It's not like if you watched,
just feels like...
if you picked an audience member up and went, right, watch Endgame and get as much out of it as you can.
Oh,
because someone's going to go, well, it's good, but I don't. This doesn't.
Why do I care?
This payoff doesn't work. This payoff doesn't work. This payoff doesn't work. Whereas I think, I'm not comparing this to Endgame, but you know what I mean. There are some films that are reliant on your knowledge of other things.
Yeah, exactly.
And this isn't relying on the knowledge of the other films too, because it was sort of a reboot at the time, except obviously the original guys, which you didn't know were in it, because Ed Helms doesn't play Rusty in the old films. It's actually one of them's the guy from The Big Bang Theory, and one of them is Anthony Michael Hall, who play him. Who actually I think were asked to do it and just weren't really bothered. But So one thing I did want to ask you about: what did you think about the the relationship between the brothers,
the kids?
Yeah,
hilarious.
Yeah, I thought it was really
one
funny.
One of my favorite dynamics, that the younger brother's bullying the older brother. The older brother is obviously he's quite sensitive and quite emotional, and he wants to sort of spread his wings in his own way. And he keeps like 7 different journals, like a wish journal and a dream journal and all this. And he's quite innocent and quite sweet. And then it's just funny to have the younger brother who just like terrorizes him and like writes, what does he write? Penis on his guitar and stuff. And yeah, I really liked it. And it sort of kind of turns on its head a little bit, doesn't it? About the older sibling being the bully and now the younger sibling's the bully. But no, I thought they were great little actors. I thought
they were really great. One of them is called Steel something. The young kid is called Steel, which I think is really cool. I think he's called Steel.
Steel and Stone in the same film.
But no, I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed the fact that the older boy is quite sensitive, but they don't over-egg the pudding with the joke too much. Like other films would make it look like he's like, he's a bit of a loser. But I don't think he is a bit of a loser in this. I think it's just that he's just a bit sensitive. Like he just he wants to be a certain way and he is a certain way. And the parents, the only real way they're worried about him is they're just worried about his resilience. They're not worried about they're not ashamed of him. Do you know what I mean? There are other films where it makes it like to be a bloke, a young man who is like this makes you less of a man.
It's bad.
Whereas in this,
it's not great.
They do have a bit of a joke about it, but it's not like, oh, you're a shit man. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's just more of a joke around the relationship between the two brothers, and I quite like that.
Yeah, like the only person whose criticism he's got to fight off is the little brother, and obviously he's just a child, so it's never really super malicious or anything. Like his parents don't mind. They're just, I suppose, a little bit worried for him, and obviously worried about the fact that his little brother is bullying him. Just finally as well, I really enjoyed the ending when they're singing Kiss from a Rose on a roller coaster. Really loved that. It was just it was random. Well, it's not even that random because they'd already established that the dad likes singing. Like he was trying to get everyone to sing in the car and stuff. And then it just reminded me a little bit of the end of 40-Year-Old Virgin.
Yeah.
This is the dawning of the age of Christmas. I was just, I suppose a little bit Family Guy-esque in that sense as well. Quite similar. Okay, so we'll move on to talking about anything that we perhaps didn't like about the film or that we would change. So, Josh, I'm coming at you. What are you thinking?
Well, I suppose I've already touched on it a little bit. It is a bit formulaic. So there are no surprises in this film. It is not turning over anything new. You know what's going to happen. So there are bits where it does fall back into like a bit of gross out humor. And there's a bit where they think that they're bathing in muddy hot mud springs.
Oh yeah,
and it turns out to be raw sewage. And
human feces.
Yeah, and it's one of those jokes that's in there for the trailer. And you're like, it didn't really add anything to the film, So they do fall back on the old favourites a little bit in places in terms of gross out humour. And I'm not that fussed, as we've talked about before. I'm not that fussed on gross out humour.
Same.
It was, a little bit formulaic, a little bit by the numbers. I mean, in some ways, I didn't mind that, I didn't mind. There is always something comforting about the same old formulas, Like we said before, what's going to happen in a film like this, what's going to happen in a comic book film, what's going to happen in an action film, whatever. But I can understand why you might think, there was potential to do more and they didn't do it. I think as well, there definitely needs to be more of a female presence in the film because so you got Christina Applegate is the female lead as Rusty's wife. The only real storyline she's got is that she's unfulfilled, and we've seen that before.
Well, I suppose you get a little bit of her history. Was she with the college fraternity thing?
Debbie do anything?
Debbie do anything, and then she tries to do that obstacle course, but downs a beer and then vomits all over the place.
And I do think they could definitely have done more with Leslie Mann's character because again, the only two strong female characters in the film are both just unfulfilled women. And I think we could have done like for example, there is no reason why, talking about things we might change, there's no reason why one of the two children couldn't have been a girl. Obviously, I understand how it might have been a bit weird to have a younger boy battering his older sister, but if you made the younger boy a girl, there's no reason why that wouldn't have worked. So maybe something like that, sort of slightly stronger female presence, but other than it being a bit formulaic and that sort of thing about the female presence, nothing really. I don't really understand where the hate's coming from, which is what we'll come on to. What about you? So you said, you thought it was meh. So what didn't you like about it?
So not a massive amount, to be honest. So it isn't really doing anything new. It's not breaking new ground and not really telling me new jokes that I haven't heard before, just maybe dressing them up a bit differently. And for the most part, the characters I did find really likable, but not necessarily unique.
They're stock.
Yeah.
Stock family, aren't they?
But that's kind of it. That's literally all I've got on my list. Like so I think just an overall feeling of, oh yeah, this is how this is going to go. Here's one joke, let's move to B. Oh, here's the next joke, let's move to C. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And obviously that branch, that sort of umbrellas over the whole film, shall we say. But I mean, I didn't dislike it by any means. And there's definitely a lot more to like there than I think to not like.
Yeah, how did you find the gross out humour? So you've got obviously like the sewage bit, and then you've also got like you say, Debbie throws up at one point. You've got a couple of jokes about Chris Hemsworth's big dick.
Gross, terrible, disgusting,
awful stuff, awful. Who wants to see Chris Hemsworth in his boxes? It's disgusting, Alice.
It is, yeah. Stop objectifying men on Hollywood. Terrible. But you know what? Again, and this is weird because I'm usually not a fan of gross out humour. I said before, like there's some stuff that happens in Kevin and Perry that really done me in, and even a bit in
the big poo.
Yeah, and is it just Friends as well? There was a bit in there.
Yeah, a couple of bits in that. Yeah, there's a few films we've done with it in.
Again, it's almost like because of who was doing it and because of the actors, it didn't affect me as much.
No.
They've got a spell over me, man. Ed and Christina, they've cast
They're great,
a spell
aren't they? They're
on me.
they're really
so
good
lovely
in it, aren't
together.
they? Yeah.
So lovely
Good
together.
chemistry.
So we'll move on then to talking about the critical reception and finding out if it is indeed underrated. So I haven't seen the critical reception, Josh, but you've got it there in front of you.
I do.
If I was going to guess, I feel like the impression I get from what you said is that people weren't very nice about it. And I think you said at one point you don't understand the hate. And the word hate is a very, very, very strong word. So I wonder, I'm going to go low with this, and I'm going to I'm going to dip into the fours and maybe say that it got a 4.8 or a 48
overall. And would that be underrated if it was that?
Yes, I would give it a little bit higher. I think this is easily a 6.5.
Yeah, it's just a solid middle of the road. Fine. Yeah, that's the same for me. Like I say, it's not doing anything new. It's not changing the world. But like fun. You pop it on a Saturday night, you just want something light. This is all right.
Exactly. Remember Just My Luck? Like, I feel exactly the same way.
It's much better than Just My Luck.
Don't know about that.
It's not got
Lindsay Lohan, McFly.
Yeah, that's true. So let's have a look then. So at the time of recording on IMDb, it gets 6.1. Not too bad. Not too bad.
Pretty normal. Pretty
around what we said, I think. That would be fair. However,
go on.
At the time of recording, and this is what I don't understand, right?
All right.
The audience on Rotten Tomatoes give it 45%.
Ooh.
And the critics on Rotten Tomatoes give it 27%.
Ooh,
which averages out to 44%. Now, for me, Alice, I just think that's well underrated. That's really underrated for me.
You know what that is, Josh? It's rotten.
It is.
Yeah.
It's rotten from Rotten Tomatoes. I don't know what the cutoff is, but it's not that bad.
Low from the critics, man. That is low.
I couldn't even, apart from, so all the things we've said, this is the funny thing, is all the things we've said are what they said, that it's formulaic, that it's, doesn't do anything new. But there's nothing wrong with releasing a film that's not trying to do anything new. I mean, how many bloody remakes has there been? Do you know what I mean? Like, so if you're going into a film like this thinking, well, this better do something new for me and this better change the comedy landscape, then you're going to come out not liking it. You got to know what you're going in for. And I think if you go into this with what we've said, it's all right, average, middle of the road, decent comedy, forgettable, disposable, light, then that's what you get.
I reckon if the critics had maybe given it like a low 5, I probably could have stomached that.
Yeah,
but I
27%.
That's low, innit? That says this is a bad film.
I mean, that's like we're getting into Green Lantern Speed, worst film ever made territory there, and it's just not. It is.
Even Grease 2 got higher than that.
Did it actually? Did it?
Yeah, I think Grease 2 got like 38 or something, but it is a masterpiece. So you can't blame the critics.
Anyway.
So underrated, I reckon.
Underrated,
definitely.
Yeah. Oh, I'm very, very pleased about that.
There you go.
So there we go, another one in the underrated vault, in the very underrated vault, I think it's safe to say, alongside Green Lantern, Speed 2, Grease 2, other ones that don't come to mind. We will be back next week with another film talking about that, whether it's underseen, whether it's underrated. We'll be back next week, so please keep subscribed, keep listening. We really appreciate you keep listening. It does genuinely mean a lot to us. If you'd like to get in touch with us and suggest a film, the email address is filmsonthatpod@gmail.com, or slide into our DMs. We sometimes check them.
Oh, do it. Slide into the DMs, listeners.
And suggest a film. So it's just Films on That Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all the social medias. And we're on the television as well, aren't we, Alice?
We are indeed. Every Friday from 6 p.m, we're on the local TV network. So if you live in Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Liverpool, or the northeast of England, you can find us on Channel 7 on Freeview. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. And we've actually been bumped up on the Sky listings. Hey. We were on Channel 195. We're now on Channel 188.
Boom.
So that's
7 places.
7 whole places bumped up. Because, you know what, Josh? I like to think we've had something to do with that.
I think so.
Our film reviews have really shown Ofcom that we are a valuable asset to the people of Great Britain.
Yeah.
So every Friday from 6 p.m.
Yes, lots of ways to listen, see, and hear us and all that jazz. So thank you very much for your continued support, and we will be back next week with another film. Until then, it's goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.